Title: The White Custodian. Part 3: The Resolution. In Part 3, The Resolution, the story covers the resolution of the conflict, the acceptance of Daniel as the custodian, and the legacy he leaves behind. It includes the reconciliation between Daniel and Kojo, the transformation of the village, and the epilogue that ties the story together. Daniel returns from the Labyrinth of Echoes, marked by the gods and accepted by the village. Kojo, who had led a faction against Daniel, confronts him and reckons with his own actions. The elders decide to strip Kojo of his ancestral candidacy if Daniel survives. However, Kojo reconciles with Daniel and asks to be taught, beginning his new role as a servant and learner. 5 years later, the shrine compound has changed, and Daniel and Kojo teach the children about Anansi and the role of the bridge keeper. The epilogue reveals a future where the village continues to thrive as a center of storytelling, and a new generation, including Daniel's descendant, carries on the legacy of remembering and honoring the past. Let's ride on. Chapter 12, Where Names Become Smoke. The deeper Daniel walked, the less he trusted his own senses. At first, the path had simply narrowed. The trees had leaned in, their roots brushing his feet like fingers testing warmth. But now, time itself seemed to be folding in strange ways. He had passed the same crooked Iroko tree 3 times. Or was it 3 versions of the same tree? He shook his head, trying to anchor himself with logic, with reason. But this was not a forest for reason. This was a forest for truth. Then the air changed. Thick, heavy, sweet like decaying fruit. Daniel stumbled into a clearing where the light twisted in wrong directions, bending around invisible corners. In the center stood a colonial desk, polished mahogany, utterly out of place, yet radiating authority. On it sat a ledger, open, blank. Behind it sat a man in a crisp British uniform from another century, boots gleaming, mustache waxed, skin pale and eyes cold. Daniel froze. The man didn't look up, just dipped a quill into ink and began writing. "I've seen this before," Daniel whispered. "An old drawing from the archives." The figure spoke. His voice was flat, colonial accented, tinged with something inhuman. "Name?" Daniel said nothing. The man glanced up. His eyes were hollow sockets filled with paper, pages where pupils should be. "I'm not here for you," Daniel replied, "and I'm here for them, for the gods." Suddenly he towered. "You speak of gods, yet you carry our stories like specimens, labeled, translated, footnoted." He stepped forward. The earth under Daniel's feet rippled like disturbed ink. "When we built archives on your ancestors' bones," the figure growled. "Son, as you studied their pain, in the comfort of catalogs." Daniel backed away, breathing faster. "That's not why I came here. I didn't. You came to know," the figure hissed. "But you came with the arrogance of one who thought knowing was enough." Then the ledger flared open, and inside were Daniel's own words. In ritual performance, likely symbolic rather than spiritual. And I didn't understand. But I wanted to. I still want to. The figure leaned in, paper eyes narrowing. "Then surrender what you think you know. Give your name to the forest, or be swallowed by your own pages." Then he took the cowrie necklace from around his neck and spoke clearly. "But my name is not the center of this story." He dropped the necklace to the earth. Silence. The colonial figure paused, then slowly vanished. not in smoke, but in shredded paper torn away by unseen hands. Daniel fell to his knees, breathing hard. Then from above a low humming began, familiar. A woman's voice, distant and haunting, singing in Twi. A lullaby. He turned. A figure walked out of the trees, his mother, but not as he knew her. This version wore kente and cowries, her eyes filled with stars. And she spoke not in English, but in a voice that came from before language. Not yet, child, she said. Then one more truth remains. And the path opened again. Chapter 13, where the river remembers. The path was no longer a path. It was memory itself. The trees had faded, replaced by a vast, shifting space filled with water, shallow at his feet, endless beyond the mist. The surface shimmered with echoes. Daniel stepped forward, barefoot now, each movement rippling with things seen and unseen. The lullaby still played. Now it was layered, one voice, then two, then a chorus, women's voices, children's laughter, drums faintly beneath, figures in the mist, hundreds, maybe thousands, some in ritual cloth, others in chains, some old, some wearing clothes from centuries long gone. Some carried staffs, others, books. A man held a broken talking drum. A woman wore beads around her waist that shimmered with flame. They all looked at Daniel. And then from the river's edge stepped the one he'd felt from the very beginning. But now, Daniel understood. He wasn't blind. His eyes had simply turned inward, staring into all time at once. The man raised a single finger and pointed to the water. Step in, he said, his voice low, deep, as if made of stone and thunder. Daniel obeyed. The moment he was knee-deep in the river, the water began to reflect not his face, but others. Nana Ya, as a young girl, crying beside a riverbank. A boy in a British boarding school, scribbling Ghanaian proverbs into a notebook while his classmates mocked him. A village burning during colonial purge, priests hiding sacred carvings under dead trees. A young Kojo, no more than 8, bowing beside the shrine and asking no one in particular, "Why not me?" Then the water stilled. Daniel looked up. The ancestors surrounded him now, closer, watching. The man with no eyes asked one question. "Who are you when no one remembers your name?" "None of them mattered here, and I am a witness," he said softly, "and cheaper, not an owner. I do not hold these stories, they hold me." A drumbeat followed, one strike. Then, a voice from the ancestors. Not male or female, but many at once, "And walk among us." Daniel's body jerked forward, but he did not fall. He merged. The river rose, but it did not drown him. It embraced him. The necklace of cowries reappeared around his neck, now glowing faintly. A final vision flashed before him. Children seated in a circle. A younger Daniel telling a story. Not from a textbook, but from memory, in Twi. A shrine behind him. Kojo watching nearby, quiet but no longer angry. And a girl, mixed race, laughing, holding a carved talking drum. Just sunrise, breaking like a promise through the trees. He had walked the labyrinth, and returned. Chapter 14, when the stranger returned. The sun had just crested the eastern hills, gold brushing the tops of the baobab trees. The village stood gathered at the forest's edge, silent, breath held tight in collective chest. It had been 2 nights since Daniel entered the Labyrinth of Echoes. Most had stopped believing he would return. Branches rustled, not with wind, but release. Birds returned to the canopy. The drum spirit stilled. A hush swept across the gathered villagers. Then a figure stepped through the vines. Barefoot, cowries around his neck. White cloth now marked with symbols none had sewn. Patterns of ash and thread etched by unseen hands. His eyes were wide but steady. His palms were upturned, as if still offering something. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A child cried out and ran to hide. An elder dropped his staff. Abina placed her hand over her mouth, eyes wet. But Daniel said nothing. He simply knelt at the forest's edge and touched his forehead to the earth. She looked down at him, and what she saw made her bow her head. The two stood in silence for a long moment, the past heavy between them. Daniel nodded once, and as a child, asking the right question, Kojo turned away. Not in defiance, but in reckoning. In the days to come, the drums would sound different. Stories would be told in two tongues. And in the dusk, some swore the trees leaned in to listen. Chapter 15, The Boy Who Carried Ashes. Kojo did not attend the feast. As the village lit fires and broke calabashes in honor of Daniel's return, Kojo wandered alone into the outer fields, where the millet stalks had turned golden and the night insects hummed without pause. The title Nkwanki Mfoe echoed in his head like a mocking drumbeat. Bridgekeeper. The boy who had dreamed of becoming the voice of the gods had instead become their echo, and the gods had chosen to speak through someone else, a foreigner, an outsider. And yet, Kojo had seen the labyrinth change the man, had seen the fear leave Daniel's eyes and something else take its place. Something not even Kojo, with all his training, had ever seen in the mirror: peace. He returned to the shrine compound before dawn the next day, not to reclaim anything, just to watch. Daniel was already awake, kneeling before the sacred tree, drawing in the dust with a stick, not recording, not copying, just remembering, as if the story now lived in him. Kojo approached quietly. Daniel looked up, didn't flinch, just nodded once. "Josh shouldn't have cursed you," Kojo said. No, Daniel replied. "But I understand why you did." Kojo lowered himself to sit beside him in the dust. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was a silence of rebuilding. "Do you ever wonder," Kojo said, "if the gods chose you not because you knew the stories, but because you didn't? You came with empty hands," Kojo continued. "And I came with fists." Then Kojo added, "See, I want to serve, still, but not as what I thought I was meant to be." He turned to Daniel. Daniel blinked. Not in pride, not in victory, but in the stunned humility of being asked by the one who once tried to destroy him. "As I will," he said. And then, in the first light of morning, Kojo picked up a calabash and began to sweep the compound, the sacred work of the youngest initiates. No title, no robe, just dust, and the boy who once carried ashes, learning how to plant seeds instead. Chapter 16, The Ones Who Remember Forward. 5 years later, the shrine compound had changed. Not in structure, but in spirit. The sacred tree still stood, its roots deeper than any memory. The circle of stones remained unbroken, but now, laughter lived here, alongside silence. Young voices echoed through the air, not in play, but in practice. Daniel sat on a carved stool under the mango tree, his beard flecked with gray, a wide cotton sash tied across one shoulder. In his hands he held a carved staff, not a symbol of power, but of responsibility. His tuchuai now flowed with the fluidity of water shaped by stone. Beside him stood Kojo, older, wiser, no longer fiery, but steady as sunrise. Where Daniel carried calm, Kojo carried fire refined by ash, Together they taught. Before them sat a circle of children, a dozen or so, their eyes wide and eager. Again, Kojo called out. Ho was Ananse. Daniel clapped once. Good. And what do we call the one who carries stories now? Another child answered. Ben Bridgekeeper. Nkwanki MFO? Daniel and Kojo exchanged a glance, both of them remembering visions, rivers, drums. Later that evening, as the children filed out, Daniel and Kojo remained behind to tidy the courtyard. The work was simple, rhythmic, peaceful. And beneath that sound, another voice rose, young, eager, female, telling the tale of how the gods once chose a stranger to protect their oldest truths, and how, in doing so, he became no stranger at all. Epilogue, what the fire left behind. The baobab tree still stood, taller now, wiser, if trees could be such a thing. Villagers came and went, born and buried under its shade. Wars came, peace followed. Technology crept into the corners of tradition. But the shrine compound endured, not as a museum but as a living flame. The recordings of Daniel Whitaker, his voice smooth, deliberate, reverent, were now digitized and stored in a glass-cased archive in Accra. But in the village, no one listened to the recordings. They listened to the people, and the people still told the stories. On the 100th anniversary of the Labyrinth trial, a crowd gathered under the starlit canopy. They came from Lagos, from Johannesburg, from Toronto and Bahia and Brixton. The returnees, the believers, the curious children of scattered bloodlines. And at the center stood a young woman, skin like polished amber, a tattoo of a spider spun into her left wrist. Her voice carried generations in it. She spoke without a script, only memory. But my name, she said, Sis Naya Whitaker Adubia, and I was not born here. But this place lived in my dreams before I ever set foot on its dust. I did not choose this role, but the river remembered me, and now I remember you. The fire behind her flickered high, as if called, and then she told the story, the whole story, of the man from Wales, the priestess of ash and stars, the boy who carried curses, the gods who defied borders, and the shrine that became a school. She told it not as a fairy tale, but as truth. We are calling you. The wind rose, stirring the tree, and somewhere, not far from the shrine, an old cowrie necklace buried beneath the roots pulsed once, faintly, as if in quiet agreement. The story would live, because someone was always listening. The end.